I left a cushy six-figure job for a startup dream. I just didn't know I was handing my vision to a thief. The first morning I walked into Athena Dynamics, my heart pounded with something dangerously close to joy. The air inside the office was laced with ozone, the scent of brand new machines and whiteboards wiped just minutes ago. I stood for a moment near the glass door with the etched logo, letting the hum of innovation buzz around me. This was the beginning of something big. My something. I met Gavin Maddox that afternoon. He had that golden boy energy, pressed blazer, strong handshake, and that unnerving talent of making you feel like he saw potential in you others had missed. He took one glance at the folder I handed him, my specs for Sentinel Shield, and said, "Let's build something revolutionary." For the first 2 months, it was exhilarating. I had a corner of the lab all to myself. The company was well-funded, and Gavin gave me the green light to build without limits. No layers of bureaucracy, like at Microsoft. I named the system Sentinel Shield because it wasn't just another firewall. It was designed to evolve, learn, and anticipate threats before they became attacks. A digital guardian with foresight. Still, even then, something prickled at the edge of my intuition. Gavin stopped by often, too often, always after hours, always when he thought I wasn't around. His compliments were sharp-edged, his curiosity too keen. He'd hover behind me just long enough to see my terminal. "That's beautiful work, Natalie," he'd say. "The board's excited. You should be proud." I tried not to flinch when he said, "The board, not you, not we." One night, around 11:23 p.m., I received an anomaly flag on my private build server, an internal breach alert. I sat up in bed and blinked at the log. Someone had accessed my sandbox instance through a backdoor route. No files were downloaded, but the system recorded the session. I replayed the keystrokes, saw the commands. They were surgical, practiced. They were someone who knew exactly what to look for. Someone like Gavin. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I walked back into the office at 2:14 a.m., badge scanned, lights flicked on one by one. I sat in front of my workstation and activated what Leo used to call the mirror function, a covert recursive module that would silently shadow Sentinel Shield's core, record every admin override, every file access, every line of copied code, all encrypted, invisible, traceable only to me. I wasn't ready to accuse anyone, not yet. But I wasn't going to stay unarmed either. Leo had drilled it into me. If you build something valuable, build protections around it first, especially if you build it inside someone else's house. I hadn't listened fully back then. I did now. From that moment on, I treated every keystroke as if someone was watching, because someone was. In the weeks that followed, I trained Sentinel Shield to do more than predict cyber attacks. I fed it anonymized case studies of insider breaches, manipulated systems, stolen IP. I designed a subroutine that mapped behavior patterns, down to login frequencies and deviations. The system began flagging irregularities without my prompting. It was learning not just how to protect, but how to question authority. I started smiling more, working longer, yes, but differently, quietly, precisely. I stopped inviting Gavin to my code reviews. He noticed. "You good?" he asked one day in the hallway, too casually. "You've been keeping to yourself." I shrugged. "Just focused. We're close to a breakthrough." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Let me know if you need anything." I nodded, but inside, I had everything I needed. That night, I stayed in the lab long after everyone had gone. I watched Sentinel Shield process threat simulations faster than any system I'd ever built. It generated response patterns I hadn't even programmed. I whispered to it like it could hear me. "You're going to protect more than just the network, aren't you?" The server lights blinked back. The next morning, as I poured myself coffee and reviewed overnight logs, a soft knock came at my office door. Rachel. She didn't smile. "Gavin wants a private update. Just you." I expected congratulations. What I got was a contract, a smile, and a knife in my back. The morning felt strange from the start. Gavin's assistant had scheduled the meeting with barely a day's notice, and the time, 9:07 a.m., was too deliberate to be accidental. I arrived 2 minutes early, Rachel wasn't at her desk, just an unreadable sticky note that read, "He's waiting inside." Gavin's office looked sterile that day. The usual designer coffee mugs and startup clutter were gone. His desk was cleared except for a single folder. The blinds were half closed, casting long gray lines across the floor. He stood as I entered, smile already in place. "Natalie," he said, tone bright, "come in. Sit down." I did, cautiously, heart already tight in my chest. "You've done exceptional work," he began. "The Sentinel Shield project has exceeded every internal benchmark. The board is thrilled. Frankly, so am I." I waited. Something was off. "Which brings us to the next phase," he said, tapping the folder. "Before we proceed with launch, there are a few formalities to finalize." He slid the folder across the table. My name was printed cleanly on the cover. Inside, a termination clause, a mutual NDA, and an IP release form. I looked up. Gavin's smile didn't falter. "Just a standard wrap-up. We're restructuring the technical team for deployment. You've taken the project as far as it needs to go. Now it's in the implementation phase." "The implementation phase?" I asked quietly. He nodded. "And per section 14.3 of your contract, all intellectual property developed using Athena Dynamics resources belongs exclusively to the company. You'll, of course, receive a generous success bonus. 300,000. It's already processed." My mind went blank, then sharpened all at once. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was planned. "I started Sentinel Shield before I joined Athena," I said. "I have dated concept sketches, code fragments." Andrea Kim entered without knocking, calm as ever, a leather folder in her hand. "With respect," she said, her voice clipped, "an idea isn't ownership. Execution under company time and using company infrastructure binds the final product to Athena. Standard practice." I looked back at Gavin. "You're serious?" He nodded again. "You'll be listed as founding engineer in the patent filings, and again, 300,000, no vesting cliffs. We're being generous." Generous. The word echoed. I had given them everything. My algorithms, my time, my trust. Gavin had smiled through every milestone. Now I saw the truth. I was never going to be part of the long-term picture. I had just been useful. But he didn't know everything. I picked up a pen, held it midair. "You're asking me to walk away from something I built. We're asking you to accept what's fair," Andrea said, "legally and professionally." I signed. Not because I agreed, but because I had already made the switch. 2 days ago, I had scrubbed the core production server and replaced it with a Mimic, an intentionally limited version of Sentinel Shield. The real version, the adaptive one, the one with full predictive threat recognition and behavioral tracking. That one had been mirrored off-site and encrypted under a rotating key. Gavin and Andrea didn't know, and they wouldn't. Not until they tried to deploy. "Thank you for your time," I said, sliding the signed papers back. "I appreciate the opportunity." Andrea didn't respond. Gavin stood and offered his hand. I didn't take it. Outside, Rachel was standing in the hallway, eyes downcast. I passed her without a word. Back at my desk, I began packing what little I kept at the office. A cactus, a photo of my dog, Oreo, a backup drive, blank on the surface. I wiped my workstation clean, erased any traces of custom-build environments, logged out of the internal Git server, except one thing. The mirror process stayed. It ran in the background, as it always had, disguised as a system-level thread, monitoring, watching, logging, ready. As I walked out of the building, security didn't say a word. My badge beeped once, final access logged, then deactivated. I passed through the glass doors and into the gray morning light. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. But just before I stepped off the curb, I turned back to look at the Athena Dynamics logo shining behind the front desk. I whispered, just loud enough for myself to hear, "Let's see how far you get without trust." They thought they buried me. But I wasn't gone. I was just letting the system breathe. At 9:28 a.m., I was sitting cross-legged on my couch in sweats, a lukewarm cup of coffee in one hand, and an old rerun of Parks and Recreation playing on mute in the background. I hadn't set an alarm. I didn't need to. The real show was just about to begin. On the coffee table, my second laptop buzzed gently. A window slid open. Athena Dynamics. Demo rehearsal active. System status monitoring. Countdown 00200. I leaned back. At 9:30 a.m. sharp, Athena's main demo room lit up with artificial excitement. Gavin stood at the front, crisp navy suit, full of swagger, speaking into a lav mic clipped too neatly to his collar. The room was empty, except for a skeleton tech crew. A rehearsal for the big day tomorrow. The investor showcase that would determine the next $75 million in Series B. They were testing Sentinel Shield's live response demo. The dummy attacks, the adaptive responses, the headline feature that I had designed to make firewalls look prehistoric. Except they weren't testing my system. They were testing the Mimic. And the Mimic had rules. It only listened to creators. And Gavin? Gavin had signed my removal. At 9:31 a.m., I took a slow sip of coffee. The screen flashed. Internal integrity risk detected. Executive override traced. User. G. Maddox chain of trust. Invalid response initiated. And then chaos. Inside Athena HQ, Rachel sat at the diagnostic station. The screen in front of her began to bloom with red alerts. Threat vector, internal risk, level 10 source, executive mail server, boardroom database. Gavin personal storage. She blinked, slowly, and then did nothing. Behind her, Gavin's voice wavered for the first time. "What's going on?" one of the engineers replied. "It's flagging. Everything." "Everything what?" Gavin barked. "Everything internal." The system, running on its Mimic code, had just flipped its own definitions of threat origin. It began logging every unauthorized command, every irregular login attempt, every IP tied to data duplication, file export, or privilege escalation. Gavin's own credentials were at the top of every list. Rachel stared at the log. It read, "Creator authority invalidated. Authentication chain compromised." She didn't delete it. She didn't escalate it. She simply folded her hands and whispered, "Finally." Back in my apartment, I slipped on a blazer over my t-shirt, tied my hair back, and stepped into the waiting black car. By 10:07 a.m., Gavin had called 3 times. At 10:11 a.m., I picked up. "I need you here," he said. "Now." I didn't respond, just hung up. Athena HQ was different this time. No greetings, no badge needed. Rachel had already unlocked the side door for me. I walked through the silence and into the demo room. Gavin was pacing, red-faced, his perfect hair starting to lose its precision. He looked up the moment I entered and stormed forward. "You sabotaged it." "No," I said calmly, and I didn't. "Then what is this? The system is flagging fake threats, shutting down modules, and logging me as a breach. Me? It's unusable." I shrugged. "Sounds like it's working." He stared. "You little—" "I told you it wasn't broken," I continued. "You're just not authorized anymore. And Sentinel Shield doesn't recognize thieves." He froze. For the first time since I'd met him, Gavin Maddox was speechless. I walked past him, opened my laptop, and projected the system log onto the big screen. "Unauthorized access. User ID, Jai.Maddox," I read aloud. "January 14th, 11:43 p.m. Behind me, he took a step back. "It's learning, Gavin. It's learning everything." He looked around, desperation climbing into his eyes. "Okay, look, we can fix this. I'll bring you back in. Co-founder credit. Chief Technology Officer, equity, whatever you want." I let him squirm. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out a small silver USB drive. Set it down gently on the conference table between us. "This," I said, "contains the proper authentication key. Insert it, and the system will stop flagging you as a threat. But it'll remember. It always remembers." He stared at it like it might bite him. "If you don't plug it in," I added, "tomorrow's investor demo collapses. You lose the round. You lose the company. And those logs?" I gestured at the screen. "They go public. SEC, FTC, tech blogs. Take your pick." I turned to leave. He grabbed the USB. "What is this?" I didn't look back. Your only way out. He wanted a miracle. I gave him a deal with the devil. Only this time, I was the one holding the pen. The conference room was dim, silent except for the low hum of the air vents. The once pristine table was cluttered now. Coffee stains, torn printouts, and crumpled sticky notes covered in half-baked solutions. It was past 11 p.m., and the only thing still running at Athena Dynamics was panic. Gavin paced by the windows, sleeves rolled up, tie undone, hair no longer perfectly styled. His voice was hoarse from yelling at the dev team, the PR team, and now me. "You're going to fix this," he said. "Tomorrow's investor pitch is make or break. And if that system melts down again—" "If," I interrupted, setting my bag down, "it will melt down again. That's not a threat. That's math." He spun to face me. "You sabotaged it." "No," I said smoothly. "You removed its creator. Sentinel Shield doesn't recognize you anymore." "I'm still CEO," he snapped. "Congratulations," I said, "but AI doesn't care about job titles. It cares about authentication chains, and yours broke the moment you erased me from it." He opened his mouth to argue, then paused, caught in his own disbelief. That's when Andrea Kim entered. She looked just as exhausted, blazer wrinkled, eyes sharp behind square-framed glasses. She dropped a thick folder on the table and sat without a word. "I assume this is serious," she said to Gavin, not even glancing my way. "Serious?" I said. "Your entire cybersecurity suite just flagged your CEO as a systemic risk." Andrea blinked. Gavin gritted his teeth. "Let's get this over with," I said, flipping open my laptop. The screen came to life, bathing the room in pale light. I opened a dashboard marked Sentinel Shadow Log and turned it toward them. January 14th, 11:43 p.m., remote access from an executive IP. File export, SS Core Framework, .7z. Timestamped, credentialed, and mirrored. Gavin flinched. "Here," I tapped another tab. "Is the copied metadata from that download, modified by user g.maddox. Here's another, March 15th, deletion attempt of AI behavior logs." Andrea leaned in, her jaw tightening. "Is all of this verifiable?" Rachel entered just then, silent as always. She didn't speak, just placed a stack of freshly printed system logs on the table and slid them toward Andrea. "No one cleared the logs," she said softly. "It's all traceable." Andrea read in silence. I watched her eyes move down a page until they landed on the breach origin field. Origin g.m.adddox at a thena.ai. Gavin tried to speak, but Andrea cut him off. "She has enough here to report a federal IP breach," she said slowly. Gavin looked at me, desperate now. "What do you want?" I folded my hands. 50% ownership of Sentinel Shield's IP, I said calmly. Official recognition as co-founder. Chief Technology Officer position with full authority over deployment decisions. $10 million in retroactive compensation. Gavin let out a strangled laugh. "Are you out of your mind?" "I'm not the one who got caught stealing," I replied. Andrea was already scribbling notes. "Legally," she said, "it's viable, especially given the paper trail." "I built that system," Gavin hissed. "No," I said. "You funded the building. I was the builder." He looked at the USB still on the table, the one I'd given him earlier, the only key to restoring Sentinel Shield in time for the demo tomorrow. "You really won't help unless I agree to this?" I met his eyes. "This isn't extortion. It's the system holding a mirror to you." Silence. Then Gavin's shoulders slumped. His voice, when it came, was flat. "Fine," he muttered. "Fix it." I smiled. "It was never broken. You were." I stood, unplugged my laptop, and slipped the signed NDA back into my bag, the one I'd never agreed to follow. As I turned to leave, Andrea cleared her throat and slid a card across the table. "If you ever want to replace him entirely," she said, "call me." They stole the tech. I reclaimed the name, the voice, and the future that came with it. The investor demo room at Athena Dynamics had never felt so alive. The space pulsed with curated confidence, soft spotlighting, walls lined with LED panels, a sleek glass podium, and 12 of the most cutthroat venture capitalists in the Pacific Northwest seated in a precise semicircle. I stepped onto the stage at exactly 10 a.m., my heels clicking against the polished floor. Behind me, the screen blazed with a clean new logo. Sentinel Shield, integrity at core. Gavin introduced me stiffly, reading off a teleprompter like a hostage. Our next speaker is the project's co-founder and newly appointed Chief Technology Officer, Natalie Park. There wasn't a trace of warmth in his voice, just public obligation. I nodded once in acknowledgement, but didn't look at him. Rachel stood near the console, headset on, eyes locked with mine for a split second. She gave me a single, slow nod. She had preloaded everything, no room for error. I took my place at the podium. "Good morning," I began. "Instead of walking you through a slide deck about how Sentinel Shield works, we're going to do something different. We're going to let it prove itself." A few investors leaned forward. "Simulated cyber attacks will begin in 60 seconds, I continued. "What you're about to see is a system responding not just in real time, but in advance. Preemptive, adaptive, ethical." I hit the launch key. Instantly, the data visualizations began. Simulated phishing, code injection, DNS spoofing, privilege escalation, all standard. But then came the curveballs. Disinformation packets disguised as internal emails, Trojans with randomized payloads, multi-origin attacks masked under valid credentials. Sentinel Shield absorbed them all. No delay, no crash, just clean interception, instant remediation, and a learning pattern graph that evolved on screen in real time. There was a murmur from the seats. The man from Redwood Capital leaned in toward his tablet. "Wait," he said. "It recognized an attack vector we didn't even build in." I smiled. Another investor said, "This is machine learning on another level." Then came the final test, a faux internal breach attempt from a fake admin account seeded into the scenario. The system halted. Alert, internal credential. Compromise detected. Source, spoofed executive authority, simulated origin, response, contained, logged, neutralized. I let the room sit in silence for 3 seconds. "This," I said quietly, "is what makes Sentinel Shield different." A woman in a red blazer raised her hand. "How so?" I looked at her, steady. "It doesn't just defend systems," I said. "It defends ethics." There was a beat, and then the room erupted into applause, standing ovation. I glanced to the far right where a tall man with salt and pepper hair, the lead from Foundation Ventures, stood first. "We're in," he said. $85 million. Contingent on your continued leadership, Ms. Park." I exhaled slowly. Behind me, Gavin said nothing. He didn't have to. His silence was confirmation that his era was over. After the demo, I walked out through the service corridor to avoid the press. Rachel caught up to me near the freight elevator. "You did it," she said simply. "No," I replied. "We did." She handed me my phone, which had been set to Do Not Disturb. A single message buzzed through. Secure. External breach attempt detected, classified as familiar pattern. I stopped walking. On screen, the system displayed a masked IP address. One I recognized. An old collaborator from Athena's acquisition pipeline, someone who'd once offered to take Sentinel off my hands if Gavin didn't. He was testing the water. Sentinel had already blocked him. I smiled. I didn't just survive the theft, I rewrote the system, including the one inside me. The rooftop garden of Athena Dynamics had never looked so polished. Rows of glowing lanterns hovered over linen-covered cocktail tables. Camera flashes blinked like tiny comets. Champagne flowed. Laughter rose in tasteful bursts. It was June 2024, and the company had just gone public with a valuation north of $4 billion. Somewhere near the back, Gavin stood beside the CFO, smiling through his teeth and clapping politely, a human press release in an expensive suit. He was still a founder, still in the photos, but no one looked at him anymore. Not really. They looked at me. I stepped up to the podium, my fingers brushing the edge of the glass lectern. The skyline behind me glimmered like something rendered by a graphics card, too perfect to be real. "Thank you," I began, "for being here tonight. not just to celebrate a number on a stock ticker, but to mark something far more important. Silence fell, reverent. We created Sentinel Shield to defend against threats. What we learned is that the most dangerous ones don't come from malware or brute force attacks. They come from misplaced trust, from inside the firewall, from people who smile and say they're on your side until they're not. A few heads turned, subtly. I let that hang before continuing. But we didn't stop there, because defense alone isn't enough. That's why today I'm proud to announce Sentinel Shield's next phase, the autonomous ethics layer. A system that not only learns, adapts, and predicts, but one that questions. One that holds a mirror to its own behavior. 2 hours. There was a beat, then applause. I stepped down from the podium and was immediately greeted by Leo Tran. "You've built something unstoppable," he said quietly, offering a small toast with his glass. "No," I said. "We built it. You taught me the foundation. You warned me." He smiled. "You listened. That's the part that matters." Rachel joined us a moment later. She was in a sleek black blazer now, the new badge on her lapel. Head of technical deployment. We exchanged a knowing glance. "I archived Gavin's credentials this morning," she said under her breath. "For good." Across the rooftop, a young woman with a badge that read, "Marina," software intern, approached timidly. "Ms. Park?" she asked. "Can I ask something?" "Of course." She hesitated. "How do I stop someone from stealing my work?" I crouched slightly so we were eye to eye. "You don't stop them," I said. "You outsmart them. You build it so well they'll need you more than they hate you. And you leave a signature in every line of code, one only you can recognize." Marina nodded slowly, her eyes lighting with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Belief. As she stepped away, my phone buzzed. Sentinel alert, real-time internal breach. Attempt blocked source, legacy admin credentials, g.maddox at athena.ai. Action, access denied, logs secured. I didn't flinch. I didn't reply. I just smiled. System secured. Threat neutralized. They tried to erase her name, bury her voice, and claim what was never theirs. But in the end, Natalie didn't just take back her creation. She rewrote the rules of who gets to lead and who gets left behind. Because justice, though delayed, cuts sharper when it's forged through silence, precision, and resolve. When injustice is met with unwavering courage, the final verdict can echo through a lifetime. Some systems defend networks, others, like hers, defend truth. And no mask of power can outlast the one thing it fears most, a creator who knows her worth.